Please welcome Ileana Gonzalez, Assistant Clinical Professor of School Counseling.
I want you to think back to your own schooling. Not the grades, not the exams, not your favorite teachers or even your first love. I want you to remember, when is the first time you had to think about your race? See, there's no biological differences between racial groups, and yet this man-made hierarchy exists. We are told which accents are appropriate, which hairstyles are professional, which neighborhoods are good, whose history matters the most. And we're all conditioned to think this way. It's called the cycle of socialization. We're born into this world full of stories and stereotypes that are already written about racial groups. And by the time we enter into schools, we are bombarded with messages on conscious and unconscious levels, not just about who we are, but who we're allowed to be in schools. Research tells us that kids of color know who they are as racialized human beings between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. Between the ages of 3 and 6. Now, when I talk about these messages, I'm not talking about the overt acts of hate, but it's the quiet patterns. The lowered expectations, the curricular omissions, the discipline disparities, the assumptions around who's articulate, who's advanced, who's dangerous, who needs to be fixed. See, education is supposed to hold up a mirror so that students can see themselves and discover who they are. And yet, so many are silenced, stigmatized, minimized. For kids of color, schools often don't hold up that mirror, but rather, school is the place where they are told who to be and where they belong. The irony is that so many educators may not want to talk about race or take any action because they fear they may say the wrong thing or don't have all the answers. But saying and doing nothing is even more harmful. When a racist incident happens at school and we don't take any action, students are learning something. When a colleague makes a biased comment and we don't call that out, students are learning something. When a policy puts one racial group over another and benefits them and we don't do anything about it, students are learning something. Silence and neutrality communicate safety for some and invisibility for others. If we want to do something about racism in systems like education, we have to move from guilt to growth, from accusation to awareness, from retreat to responsibility. So, what can educators do to create space to affirm the identity of students and to make space for children to tell their stories? Well, first, it begins with awareness. It begins within us. We have to be hyper-aware about how our own racial identity has impacted our life's journey. We have to explore how we've been conditioned with racial scripts about other groups. And we have to be in tune with the feelings that brings us. Because feelings are information. And when we sit with information that challenges us, we grow. We need knowledge. But we have a lot of unlearning to do as we learn. We have to interrogate what we know about racial groups and figure out, where did we learn that? We have to know the true histories of our communities, the true histories of our students' communities. We have to know about the policies and procedures that are affecting our student, not just in the classroom, but out there. We have to figure out who's making these decisions and get a seat at that table. We have to have dialogue skills. Oftentimes, conversations about racism stall because people hear that word racist, and they think it's a moral verdict. They hear, "You're a horrible person," or "I can't believe you don't know this." But what if we use language like, "Why are Latino students getting suspended at higher rates than any other racial group in our school?" Why is there an overrepresentation of white students in our gifted and talented programs in our districts? Why are Black boys overrepresented in our special education programs? See, this language isn't about individual villainy, but it's about systems. And we as educators, we understand systems. We understand attendance systems, we understand tracking systems, we understand data systems. So let's use language that invites curiosity. What are the patterns that we're seeing, and how is that showing these outcomes? That makes space for collective responsibility. And lastly is action. We need to take action to make space for children to tell their truth and affirm their identity. Ask yourself, how do I make space to listen to them? Listening is one of the most disruptive acts that we can do to challenge a system that was not built on centering student stories. A student may come to you and say something like, my teacher made a racist comment today in the classroom. And our immediate response is, no, that's not true. But see what just happened there? We went from listening to defending. What if instead we said 3 simple words? Tell me more. These words communicate something radical. Your experience matters more than my discomfort. Oftentimes, kids are just seeking validation for their emotional truth. Wow, that sounded hard. Yeah, that's a difficult situation. I can understand why you would feel helpless in that moment. Validation isn't necessarily an agreement, but it's an acknowledgement of an emotional truth. And that truth challenges a dominant narrative about who these students are and who they're allowed to be in schools. Listen, racism has been embedded in systems like education's for generations. It is not going to go away because you went to a workshop or read a book or listened to me up here in this Ed Talk. But every time that you choose courage over comfort, every time you choose to reflect instead of react, every time that you choose to see what was once invisible to you, you will change. And now more than ever, this is what democracy looks like. A space where everybody's story and truth and identity belong. So that when that student looks at you and says, who am I allowed to be here? Let's make sure that the answer for every single child is all of you. You're allowed to be all of you here. Thank you.